Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Tyler Harms. I'm the Executive Director of Iowa Young Birders, and welcome to our Birds of Hungary virtual event. We are very lucky this afternoon to have a young birder, Zita Robertson, joining us. Zita has been on some of our Iowa Young Birders events in the past. She's one of our regular young birders. She lives in Canton, Missouri, but has spent the last 9 or so months in Hungary, where some of her family members live. And she is going to take the afternoon today to tell us a bit about the birds that she's been seeing in Hungary. So welcome, Zita. Thank you very much for talking with us this afternoon, and I will let you take it away.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me. I would like to start here with a quick question. Would any of you be going to out and going birding if you weren't sitting here?
I probably would be, but I'm more excited about the presentation than I would be about birding.
Cool, and thank you for being here. Um, yeah, I currently live in Hungary in the town of Székesfehérvár. It's on what they call the west side of the Danube, about 40 miles southwest from Budapest, and the same distance from one of the biggest lakes in Central Europe called Lake Balaton that we're going to be talking about a little more in the presentation here. I'm going to share my screen so that we could get started. Here's the first slide. You can find my email right here. If you'd like to contact me after the presentation is over, you can feel free. I will have to be answering any questions that you have. Here's a picture of me trying to get a picture of this bird that kept flying away, and it's called a windchap. It's one of my latest light birds as well, and it was also taken one of my favorite places to bird. Who has a favorite place that they go to bird and they always go there no matter what kind of weather it is, just so they can find some kind of new bird?
I definitely do.
And where do you usually go?
I usually go down to my local park. It's called East River Valley Park. It's just down the street from my house, and it's right along the Skunk River, which flows right through the middle of Ames, which is where I live.
Cool. Yeah, this place is a little further away. We usually have to take bus to go anywhere to bird because here we live, like I've already mentioned, in a city. It is fairly big compared to where we usually see cities around where we live. Duh. So has about 100,000 people, and we live pretty on the outskirts with family homes, not these huge apartment complexes. If you could go anywhere in the world, what would be a place that you would feel that you really want to go to just see anything there?
I would probably go to a place it's pretty near my house, or not, it's about half an hour away from me, called Hawkeye Wildlife Management Area. I try to beg my parents to take me there every weekend.
Cool. I've never been there. What kind of habitat is it? Does it have a lake, or does it have any trees, or what?
A river that turns into this huge lake, and then it's really a lot of different habitats. It also has a marshy area and then some wooded parts too.
Cool. That's got to be a really cool place to go bird.
Yeah, it is.
Here on this slide, you can see this really long flight that we had to take to get to our destination, but it actually was a bit shorter because we went from Chicago to Frankfurt and then to Budapest. Here is the country a little bit closer up. It is about half the size in all of Iowa. So it isn't really that big compared to any other countries that we'd be used to seeing in the US or the Americas. It's is in the middle of the Carpathian Basin, as you can see on this map. Here are some larger mountains. Uh, in the earlier part of the 20th century, the Hungary was still spread out. It contained most of the Carpathian Basin, so it was much larger. Now it includes some mountains here and a big field, or I guess it isn't a field, it's prairies down here in this southeastern part of the country. So it's a very different habitat depending on where you are in this, even if though it's a small country. We live in the city, right, as I've already mentioned. So we have some common birds that you can find in pretty much any city you go, in any part of the world, really. So the first one here will be the house sparrow. I know this is a really boring bird, really, because it can be found everywhere in America as actually an invasive species. But here, and it's one of its native countries, I've noticed that it has a lighter colored beak than the majority that you can find in the Midwest. Another big difference that I've noticed in the field marks is that the black under the chin doesn't extend as far down as you can see on this bird. It covers the entire breast, it almost goes down to where the belly is right here. I really like noticing these kinds of things. It makes me feel like I've discovered something new, but even if it really isn't new, so I like doing these kinds of things, and I'm going to encourage everyone to try and find these interesting things in the natural world that you can find that are different or the same anyway. Another bird that you are really likely to see in pretty much any town all over the world is the rock pigeon. Of course, there are a bunch of other kinds of pigeons too, and they often hybridize, especially where there are so many of them. As in the previous bird or house sparrow, I've seen that in the pigeons, they also have bigger differences here and in the US. On this picture up here, you can see that they are nesting in a sandbank near a lake. I've never seen this in the US, and I think it's very interesting that here in one of their native countries, they have used these cavities that other birds have created to nest in, and not just on big apartments, patios, gutters, and other man-made things, as I've seen in the US. Have any of you seen these birds nesting anywhere? I'd be interested to see if anybody has any other experiences.
I think we've had house sparrows take over robin nests in like the places between the gutter and the siding and our house.
Yeah, I've seen that happen too, and I think that's a really interesting thing that they will pretty much take over any kind of nest. The rock pigeons won't usually do that so much because they're a bigger bird and they don't really build nests at all. Another common bird that, strangely enough, you can find in the city is the white stork. This is one of my favorite birds because it's one easy to find and you can find it in pretty much any kind of habitat. As you can see, it likes foraging in fields near cattle farms or where it can find pretty much any kind of food. It also likes eating fish though, and like I said, anything that it could find. It builds these huge nests on the tops of power line posts, and people really do like these birds. They usually put out, if they want the birds to move in, they put on on this post on the top this metal ring with a wire mesh on the inside so that would have an easier platform to build their nest, and so that they wouldn't get electrocuted if they accidentally put it so that it would be connected. An interesting behavior that most people also really like and listen to it and notice it around here is when they clatter their beaks. They usually do this when the chicks are still young, because one of the parents is always standing there on the nest, standing guard, protecting the chicks when they are still very vulnerable. The other one is, of course, going to find food. When they come back and they greet each other, they always, or not always, but most of the time, they will throw their head back so that their head is upside down, and then they will clap their two mandibles together, and it makes a really cool sound. Here I have this recording that I have put in here. I'm going to listen to it. Let me know if you can't hear it. I think this is a super cool sound, especially that they synchronize. Once they've gotten started, they will do it for a fairly long time and synchronize the two birds will actually do it at the same time. Another bird that looks pretty similar and actually is a stork is the black stork. When I came here, before we came in August, I really wanted to see this bird. I knew that it was fairly rare, and there were only about 300 nests around the country. I also knew that they only nest in these deep pine forests, and they like nesting in trees, the complete opposite of the white storks. Here's a picture of these birds. They are also very secretive. They don't usually go to these parks in town to go feed or anything. They usually keep away from people as much as they can. I've been trying to find places where I can see them, but they are so protected here that the government will not allow people, even birders that don't want to harm these birds, to go near their nest because they are so scared of people. They will actually abandon their entire nesting site for years at a time if they see that the people are moving around under their nest. It makes them pretty uncomfortable. Now, as you notice, we were starting in the city, and now we're moving towards the more wild places here. There's a pretty, I would say it was a big park in the middle of town here, where you can see a wide variety of birds because there are not only forests, but there's also big reeds and fairly deep water. Some birds that you can find near the water are gulls or ducks or grebes, great crested grebes. There are a lot of those, and we're going to talk about those in more detail later on. In the forest, you can find a variety of songbirds, as well as bigger birds, including thrushes that we will also be talking about, and some other, I guess you would say, meat eaters, including some sparrowhawks and other birds of prey. One of my favorite birds is this one right here. Does anybody have any guesses on what this bird could be?
Zita looks to me like some sort of finch.
This is actually a really teasy picture because it is from behind, of course, and it is about the size of a robin, or it might be bigger. So it actually does eat some seeds, so it does need that type of beak. I'm going to give another clue. It has I guess you would say, substitute in Iowa that is all blue.
Oh, a jay.
Yes, you're really awesome. I like that guess. It is a Eurasian jay. You're wonderful. I really like that you noticed this, even with this picture, that it isn't really good because they always move around. You can't really get a good picture. They also like eating worms and roots on this next picture, which shows them better. Up here, I saw it pulling the grass out of the ground and turning it around, and it ate the roots off. It wouldn't eat the grass, it threw that away, but it ate the roots. I thought that was a very interesting thing. As you can see here on the wing, it has blue and black striping on the primary wing covers and the alula feathers. On most jays, you can find blue coloring. On this jay, the blue jay, and even the scrub jays have blue, even if it isn't too distinctive on the back and the head mostly. What would be some other forest birds, do you think, that you could find in coniferous forest and other types of mixed forest, and they like dead trees?
Woodpeckers?
Yes, you've got some really good guesses today. We've got all the woodpeckers that you could possibly imagine in all kinds of colors here. We have these kinds that are pretty similar to the downy and hairy woodpeckers that you can find in Iowa. There are two species that are common and look fairly similar to one another. This is the great spotted woodpecker, and as you can see, it has a very distinct head pattern. This is the big difference in between the two species, great spotted and Syrian woodpecker. As you can see here, this black stripe reaches all the way back to the back of its head and connects with this other stripe here. The Syrian woodpecker that sorry, I don't have a good picture of it that would actually show this line right here does not connect. It ends right here under the ear. And if you know what you're looking for, it's actually pretty easy to identify them and make a difference to two species if you know what you're looking for. That's one of my biggest problems with identifying birds, is that I never know what to look for, especially when these are new birds that I've never seen. I had a big problem in August. Most of the time what I do is I look at the general shape so I could start trying to get other birds. If I see it in a forest, I know I'm not going to guess it's a gull, so I could illuminate other birds and eventually end up with one. Now this takes a long time, so I'm really curious of how do you two start identifying a bird? Like you see it and you know it's going to fly away. What do you look at?
So what I do is I first check to see if I can figure out what kind of species it is, like whether it's a warbler, a vireo, grosbeak, or anything like that. And then I identify things that I know have can define species, like behavior. Is it bobbing its tail? Is it wagging its tail? Does it have wing bars? What color is it? And then I try to get as good of a look and then try to cement it in my memory. And then I try to grab my bird book as soon as possible to identify based on those factors.
Yeah, that's a really good thing, and I do that too, is that I try and look at the shape at first. My mentor, John Bershowitz, actually, he lives in Canton and he was a professor who's now retired. He actually told me that in the back of the Peterson books, there are these silhouettes. And if you practice and practice and practice, then you can eventually, even when the light is bad, even if you can't see anything but the head, you have a pretty good chance of illuminating different kinds of songbirds. Even if it's vireos, then you can figure out what kind it is, or warblers. I really like going to different kinds of habitats. Like one day I will go to a lake, and then the next day I will go to some kind of forest to just see the comparison of what kinds of birds would be arriving in spring earlier or these types of things. Here's a habitat that's pretty close to us, and there aren't really much birds. Here you would expect that you could see if you were good time and good weather and everything was blooming, you could see a ton of bird species, especially during migration season. But my biggest problem is that past this group of trees, you have um, sorry, you have a big forest. There are actually pretty big birds there. Otherwise, right here on the other side of this field, there's a huge highway. I really don't like this, but what would be some birds that you think you could actually find, even though um, there really wouldn't be anything?
Well, I'm basing this off like experience from the Midwest, but like you might be able to find song sparrows or red-winged blackbird or like blackbirds or any sort of like field sparrows that just sort of like open habitats like that.
Yeah, those are some really good guesses, and I don't understand really why there aren't so many sparrows here. There are like reed buntings that live, of course, in reeds, and there are the house sparrow and the Eurasian tree sparrow, but otherwise not many. Here, a bird that you are very likely to see is the Eurasian magpie. There are no magpies, of course, in the Midwest, but in the South, you can find the yellow-billed and the black-billed magpie. This bird is very easy to identify because one has a long tail, taking the shape into view first. And then we have the fact that it has very contrasted coloring, that it has black and then white and then black all over its body. When it's flying, it is very easy to recognize by the white wing patches on the primary wing feathers, and that it has some white on the back and here on the belly. I really like this bird because everybody has different views on it. The general interpretation when we hear the word magpie here is that they are thieves and nobody likes them. In fact, they used to hunt them. This view is based on the fact that if you're picnicking somewhere and you leave for a second, then they will actually go there and steal your food. Or if you're cooking something over a fire and you throw the compost away, then they will come, like 6 of them, they will fight over who gets the leftovers. So they don't really mind people, but they are very intelligent. This leads me to a story that I forgot to mention with the woodpeckers. I've read them in numerous books that crows will do this and other um, birds that don't really eat too much meat. They like to eat nuts or things. So, especially in cities where there are a lot of cars, these birds, I've never seen it with magpie. Like I said, I saw it with a woodpecker. They will sit on the power line post, and then when there's a red light, they will throw the nut in a perfect place so that they know that the car tires will break it. And then they wait until the next red light, fly down and eat it. So this was really cool to experience, although I did not realize that this was what was happening when we were coming home from a birding trip by bike one time. We were going on one side of the road, and on the opposite uh, side, there was this tree and someone's garden that had a woodpecker on it. I was looking at it, that's really cool. I haven't seen one from this close in a long time. And then it came closer. It flew onto the power line post that was in front of us. And then it was just looking, had this huge walnut in its mouth. When I got to where it was, it flew out and dropped the walnut right in front of me. I got scared at first of why did it want to kill me with this walnut, but it actually didn't. It wanted to break it like the crows that I read about. So I didn't break it for it, sadly, because I didn't know what it was doing. I should have broken it. I didn't think about it, but that was super cool to experience. Another bird that really likes these grassland habitats is the Eurasian skylark. They do this really cool performance in early spring and all the way until May. I saw one, in fact, yesterday, doing this exact same thing. It will fly up out of the grass and really high up, it will start singing while it's flying. And it has this really cool song. It has trills and other things. I'm going to play it in just a second. But there are other kind of larks too, including this crested lark and the horned lark that you can also find in Iowa. But this is the only one that you can see doing this. This very easy way of making a difference between the crested lark and the Eurasian skylark. I'm going to play this audio again. I hope you can hear it this time too. So you can hear that it has trills and whistles, and they're very different actually. So like I said, the biggest difference that you can make from other singing birds is that it flies when it's singing. It's really cool to watch too. So when it comes down, it's like the woodcocks. I don't know if you guys have seen the woodcocks do their dance in early spring.
I've seen it, Zita.
Cool, I think it looks really awesome. So it's a similar thing here, where it flies up super high, it's singing up there, and then it comes diving down like a rock. When it reaches about a 2-meter distance from the ground, it will, about 6 feet, it will start hovering, and it's still singing, and this is when it does its really long trill. It will just, it's very similar to the chirping sparrow's song. And then it will just disappear in the grass, and about 10 minutes later, we'll repeat it again, and it does this all day long. Here is a picture of both that you can see the difference. Here, the eastern meadowlark is one that you can find, and it's pretty common in Iowa. I suppose you've both seen it. And it does have a really short tail, as opposed to this one, which has a very long tail. The crested lark has a very short tail as well, and it also, instead of this white right here, it has a brown streak. That's another big difference between the two species. I know this picture isn't very good and it doesn't show the face of this bird, but it does not have any yellow on it at all. So this is a very interesting species that I was super excited to see this spring. The biggest reason why I was so excited is because there are a lot of old wives' tales and things that are connected to this bird. For example, there's a saying that you have to start plowing your fields when you first hear this bird around the 17th of May. So it actually starts singing very early compared to all other songbirds. We're continuing with birds that you can find in big meadows and places like that. But this next bird does not really live in these huge grasslands. It likes to have bushes and places to hide. We have the ring-necked pheasant. You might have seen this in Iowa too, because it is a very common game bird all over the world. they will raise them in captivity and then let them go in hunting properties for the purpose of people to go out and shoot them and yay, I found this bird. They're actually very pretty, including the fact I really like them, that they have a super long tail. They also don't really mind people. In fact, when I took this picture, we were sitting up in a bird a birding tower, that's what they call it here, where you go up and there are benches and things, but there's this small window so they really can't see you, and it came right under us. It was really cool to see them. And it also is very interesting when you can see them crow. The males from early spring until the end of fall, so all summer long, they will try and sing each other down. They will sing from one side of the field, and then the next one will sing from the other side and other sides as well. They will all chime in eventually. And it has a very distinct song. When we go out birding, if we don't hear this in the first 10 minutes, then we're like, well, where did the pheasants go? Why aren't they here? Where did they go? There are usually so many of them. And really, there are a ton. You just can't really see them. We went to this place where you're not really supposed to go. We went across this big field with reeds and a few bushes, and there are at least 30 of them that just flew up in a big flock in front of us. And it's really cool to see them, but it also scares you a lot of times because I almost stepped on that bird. How didn't I see it? I have a sound for this one too. I'm just going to play it right here. So as you can hear, it has a very mechanical song that you can't really mix up with anything else. That's one of my favorite parts about this bird, that it is very easy to identify. It's like, I saw that bird, okay, oh, there's that. You don't even have to look at it and check mark, I saw that pheasant too. I have a pretty interesting story to tie to this bird too. Once we were birding pretty far away, and we were about to try and find a place to eat lunch. And we saw, or we didn't see it, but we wanted to, we heard this bird in the reeds, in these bushy places there. And it was really close, closer than usual, because they don't really like crowing near people. And we were looking for it, and my brother found this mammal skull. Does anyone know what kind of animal this could belong to?
My guess would be a beaver.
Yes, it is a beaver, and one of the biggest differences in between, let's say, groundhogs and beavers is that, as you can see right here, the huge front teeth are covered with this red coating. It is actually iron that is on their teeth, which helps protect the tooth itself from becoming broken and cracked all over the place from chewing on trees all day long. Another very interesting thing is that the other tooth that is right here in this case missing, you can pull it out if it is old enough, and on this one it probably reaches about right here. So it's super long, which gives it extra leverage to be able to chew down these huge trees. This is also not the first time that we saw these and found these skulls. We actually found one at Wakanda State Park, the nearest park that we can go to where we used to live in Missouri. As we got closer to the water, and of course we started in the city and then we moved to more forest habitat and then to the grasslands. Let's go see what kind of birds that we can find closer to the water. When I came here, I thought that these birds would be living in these mud flats and they would be more similar to killdeer. They actually are plovers, but they're not Charagrus plovers like the semi-palmated plover, the killdeer, and so forth, the ones that have these rings and a very distinct brown and black and white pattern. This bird also has a really cool wing. As you can see on this bird and all the others as well, except for the young ones, their first set of feathers, it looks like it has triangular and it looks like the killdeer's wing. But once they become an adult, their primary wing feathers become this huge round shape, and it helps them maneuver in the air and make this really interesting movements. I don't know why, because they eat grubs and worms and pretty much anything that they can find on the ground. As you can see on this habitat photo, there are two birds here. These are actually lapwings. And in the background, there's a big patch of reeds, then some woods. And this is a very wet field. There's actually a pond right here. I was standing on the edge of it by the road. So it was really interesting to find these birds in the middle of a field, because before we came here, like I mentioned, I thought they would be living on mudflats, because they don't like to nest in mudflats. I don't know why. I think it's because of some predator, but their behavior is very similar to the killdeers. I've actually seen it, they will do the broken wing trick where they pretend that their wing is broken. Have any of you seen that before, killdeer?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's really cool that they do that, and they're really smart figuring these things out. It also has a really cool sound, and it's actually pretty funny. They sound like video games, actually. I think this is a super cool song that they actually only make this sound when they're flying, and this was also multiple birds. They're communicating to one another during they're flying around in circles doing these really cool maneuvers in the air that I said that they could do with these huge things, huge primary wing feathers. Another bird that you can find right here back in the reeds, it doesn't really like to come out at all, is the Eurasian moorhen. This bird, like I mentioned, doesn't like to show itself at all. It will usually just sit in the back of reeds and make this really cool sound. It is very similar to the common gallinule that you can see or hear pretty often in Iowa and Missouri, of course, in these wetland habitats. A very interesting thing is their feet. They're this really cool green color, and they are not webbed, but they can swim. And another very interesting thing that I've noticed with these birds is that we've been about birding when it's been raining about 5 times altogether in wetland habitat. And I've always seen these birds come out like 10 at a time out of the reeds when it starts raining. I don't know why. I'm thinking because of the pressure change. All the bugs get pushed down to the water surface, and they can get to them easier. They can eat them just off the surface, and the ones that have already drowned off the water, and they can get to food very easily. So this was a very interesting thing that I noticed back in August, so pretty early. And you can see these birds all year round. I saw one in December, and I saw one just yesterday. I heard it in the reeds. So this bird does not really care what kind of weather it is. It will just sit there in the reeds. Another bird that you can find in the reeds that I do not have a picture of because it does not come out of the raise it like at all. It spends its entire life in there. Is the water rail. It is very similar to the Virginia rail that you might not have seen, but it has this really longish beak, and it's a very pretty bird. It makes a squealing sound like a pig. It's very interesting. Another bird that you can find right on the edge of the lakes is the kingfisher. Common kingfishers are about half the size of the belted kingfishers, and not quite as big as a robin, so they're really tiny. And a thing that I've noticed, behavior, that I think is because of their size difference, they sit lower in the branches or in the weeds than the belted kingfishers. The belted kingfishers, they will sit even on power lines and then dive down into the water to catch their prey. As you can see on this picture on the right here, it is sitting in a small bush. I know it doesn't really quite show here, but it's about 5 feet above the water, so it really isn't that much. And they can also stay underwater for a considerable amount of time. Another very interesting thing that I noticed with these birds is that even if they dive down and do not catch the fish that they are looking for, they will not fly back to the same branch and continue watching. Hopefully some kind of fish will be brave enough to come back to the same place. They will actually fly to a different location. For example, this bird would be flying from here. I watched it for a while to right the other side of this big lake right here. On the other side, there was this big bush that it would sit in the middle of and just stay there for a little bit, go to a third part of the lake, and then come right back here. So it was making these circles all day. It was really interesting. Another bird that you can find in open water, not so much near the reeds, although it nests in huge reeds, is the mute swan. I know you can find this bird in Iowa as well, although it is not as common. You can find two kinds of swans in the Midwest. Of course, the trumpeter in the winter months only, pretty much. I've only seen one around this time, and the mute swan. Mute swan, I've seen it more north in near Chicago. I've seen more of them, but none of them really nest in the Midwest. Here, there's a ton of them though. Even on this really touristy beach part, one of the biggest towns near Lake Balaton that I mentioned earlier, there's this pair that will stay there year round. And once I was there January or February, I think, and they are so tame because they get food from the tourists in the summer that I was able to get like 2 feet from them, and they would just look at me and then they would go continue eating these mosses off the bed of the lake. I really like these birds, and I've had some interesting experience with swans actually, because once I found a hooper swan that was probably a captive bird that they let go of, but it was really cool, and I think they're much more elegant than these mute swans. Another bird, the great crested grebe that I mentioned earlier, even though it's a grebe, it's not similar at all to the piebald. It eats a lot more fish and bigger fish. As you can see, its beak is more adapted to that kind of feeding. Another big difference between grebes and other water birds, and also loons have the same field mark, is that here their feet are very far back. And I have yet to figure out or learn why they are so far back, but I think it looks really awesome. Here is Lake Balaton. It's fairly big. It's the biggest lake in Central Europe, actually, and the 23rd biggest lake in Europe. So it's pretty long, as you could see in the beginning of my slides. There's a picture of it there. And there are multiple beaches with people year round, but there are a lot of sea ducks in winter, including goldeneye. I really like these birds because you can find them in the US and here as well. Although there are more nesting birds, nesting population is much larger here than in the US. Some more birds that you can find here include the gulls. This park that I mentioned in town near us has a ton of black-headed gulls nesting there. And another gull species that nests here, unlike all the others, would be the Mediterranean gull. The biggest difference is, even though they have a black head, both of them, is that as you can see on this bird, there's a white stripe right here. Otherwise, this primary wing feather, especially on the underside, is black. These Mediterranean gulls have a completely white wing, which makes them easy to identify from a distance as well. That's another big difference from these black-headed and Mediterranean gulls. The ring-billed is that they don't have black wing tips. It is more like a fading into gray, and then they have a black head as well. So this is kind of, for me, a different group of gulls. Like there's the black-headed gulls, and then there's the other gulls. There will be some more birds here that I want to mention about ducks and things for the wetland habitat, but we're going to run out of time here, and there's one big topic that I haven't even covered yet. So we're going to jump right to it. I don't know how much Edith you know about taxonomy, but we're going to review here the different taxonomic ranks. I really love taxonomy, and I think it's interesting to look at the different things that you can find gaps or mistakes that are kind of interesting. They've been trying to fix, including our next example. Just a quick review, we have the biggest group called the domain Eukarya, which is divided into kingdoms, including the Animalia. The next group would be phylum Chordata, subphylum Vertebrata, which includes all the birds, of course, that have not only a spinal cord, but vertebrae. So we haven't narrowed it down to birds yet, which would be our next rank, the class Aves. If I said, let's say, Passeriformes, which is an order, Edith, could you tell me some bird or family or something that would be in the order Passeriformes?
Like, I don't know, sparrows?
Yes, that is a very good example for Passeriformes. In fact, the house sparrow is the Passeriform because it not only belongs to the order Passeriformes, it belongs to the family Passeridae. The subfamily, it doesn't really have subfamilies, but I'm sure there are different variations around the world. I do not know of any. But the genus, which is the first word in the Latin name of each bird, is also Passer. The species is Domesticus, and there are, of course, subspecies, I'm sure. So that's a very good example because these sparrows are like the passerines. The birds that we're going to be talking about are not at all related to sparrows. They are the thrushes and the old world warblers. Here we have the Eurasian blackbird, which is, like I said, the substitute for American robin. They, as you can see, look very similar, only that the robin, of course, has red on the belly. A very interesting thing that I've read about, and I actually saw it a couple days ago, or it might have been Friday. Yes, I think yesterday night, when we were going into town, I saw this bird, a blackbird, that had these white patches on it. And this year, there will be a lot of them, and I've read about it in the news even, they saw a completely white blackbird fledgling. And this is because of lack of pigment in their colors of their feathers. And I think it's very interesting that I was able to experience one of these birds that flew across the room. And I was like, what is this? It has this white patch right here on the rump. And I was like, ooh, this is really cool. I saw this bird that is pretty rare because they don't usually have white anywhere. So let's get to the point of this whole topic. My biggest problem in taxonomy that I noticed. We have the European robin, Erythicus rubicula, which is the Latin or scientific name. It belongs to the family, which, like I said, is right under the rank order. So this will be the next one, Muscicaphidae, which includes all the old world warblers, including the nightingale, the blue throat, the silverbird, and of course many more. Then we have the American robin and the Eurasian blackbird. They all belong to the family Turdidae, with the New World thrushes that are obviously mostly called thrush, including the clay-colored robin. They have changed that to clay-colored thrush. But there was actually a proposal by the American Ornithologist Union or Society, I'm not sure which publicates these proposals, is that they want to change the American robin to American thrush, I believe. But so many people were so used to everyone saying robin, and everyone knew what that was, that they were voted down. They wouldn't change it to robin, which I think was a really good decision that they wanted to change it, because these blackbirds also belong to the same genus, even Turdus morula and Turdus migratorius. Because they belong to the same family, I don't understand why it would be two different names. I did some research and I noticed that, and I read about it, that the European settlers that went to America were missing these European birds, and they saw this beautiful robin-like bird because they knew that the European robin had a red breast and a darker back, a lighter belly. So they decided to name this American robin, and since then, this name has been kept up for the generations since. The Eurasian blackbird is, of course, called blackbird because it's all black. But here, it actually belongs to all these other thrushes that are called redwing or fieldfare or ring owl, these really weird names. Not always thrush. These are actually very interesting things, and I was very excited to figure out why they call the American and the European robin the same, especially that, of course, they belong to different families. Now, this would be a good time to stop. Tyler, do you think that I should continue, or checking the time now, do you think I should close this presentation up right now?
How many slides do you have left, Zita?
I would like to include the passerines and the carnivores. I am currently at 29. I would have 10 more slides to go, which won't take too long, about 20 minutes, I should say, at the most.
I'd say let's keep going, and if Edith or anyone else needs to jump off, then they're welcome to do so. But we'll keep going.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to continue then. If you go out birding, then you're more than likely to see in Iowa chickadees. They have a really definite song that you can recognize from far away, and calls the same way with these chickadees or titmice here, called the great tit, and the Eurasian blue tit is another common one. These birds are everywhere, and everybody knows them because they are really common feeder birds as well, very similar to the chickadees. Even though these are called great tits, they are very similar to the chickadees and also titmice because they belong to the family Parrotidae. Unlike this next bird here called the long-tailed bit. Even though it is called the same as the previous birds, it has zero relationship with them because the long-tailed ticks actually belong to Angusalidae family, which includes a bunch of other long-tailed birds, including the western U.S. bush tit that I think is a really cool bird. I'd like to see that one sometime. So even though these blue-gray gnatcatchers here don't eat seeds and grasses as much as the long-tailed tit, I brought this in as a good example because of its behavior. They often go in smaller groups of 2 or 3, and then they will be flying around in trees, and you go to the next tree and just scan them for bugs. In the long-tailed tit's case, flower buds. It will also eat some kinds of larvae that it finds on the branches and other seeds and things. Another bird or birds that you can find not in bushes or things, even though they are warblers actually, are these common chiffchaff, the Eurasian reed warbler, and the sedge warbler are the most common ones. As you can see on the pictures even, they have all been living in reeds on these, these common chiffchaffs actually live in bushes and trees. You can find them in forests as well. So you can find them pretty much anywhere, really. They really do like these thick places though, especially the sedge warbler. Even though the sedge word, you think of these big bushy piles of sticks and things, it doesn't really like those places. It likes these huge piles of reeds or these big reeds near water. They actually like singing really low, about 4 inches above the water most of the time. Unlike these Eurasian reed warblers, which will sit out on the top of one of the reed stalks and just sing its little heart out all day long. And then it will go down, and for about 10 minutes, it will be jumping around down near the base of the reeds, and then it will fly back up again. Yesterday, I saw a great reed warbler, which is a bit bigger than this bird right here. It also has a larger beak. That's the biggest difference. And another thing, it doesn't really jump around. It will sit there on top of the reeds for even minutes at a time. For example, yesterday I saw it and it was sitting there for 10 minutes. I was like, what is this? How is this a warbler to be just sitting there? I've never seen it stay in one place for this long. Because even the wood warblers that you can find in Iowa, you know that they just jump around all over the place. You can hardly ever find them. So this is a very interesting thing as well. Some other little birds that you can find in various habitats are these European stone chats. I know you're looking at this slide right now and you're like, what is the comparison that I could bring up to bring together the European stone chat and the pileated woodpecker? But actually, the stone chat is the bird of the year in Hungary, and as is the pileated woodpecker in the US. So these European stone chats live in these vast fields with, of course, a few bushes so that they could sit out on the top for hours at a time, and just when they spot a fly or some kind of flying insect, they would just fly out and grab it like a phoebe and then fly back to the exact same bush. The reason why I brought up this phoebe is because, like I mentioned, their feeding habits are very, very similar, including the fact that every time they land, they will make this really interesting sound. And they will bob their tail actually, and then they will just sit there motionless until they find their next prey that they're going to fly out and catch it. I think this is a really interesting behavior because they always fly out in a different direction, and it's really cool to just watch them. Like the, um, I don't know, I haven't been an example like this, but the vultures. You can't really find vultures in Hungary. They actually saw a few of these synergids or black vultures near the capital city, Budapest, about a week ago. And that was a really big news that was in the newspaper, even in this county. So this was big, really big news that they saw a vulture here. Other vultures that they have seen before here in Central Europe would be the Eurasian griffin and the Egyptian vulture that you can find mostly in Spain and France. Now, I haven't been able to figure out what birds would substitute these vultures by eating all the dead meat that they can find, like deer that have been hit along the highway. You can always find turkey vultures in Iowa just sitting there and feeding on these animals. So I've noticed that crows and eagles do a lot of this cleanup work. There are a bunch of different kinds of crows. You can find the most common ones would be the rook. It's a really interesting name for these birds, and they have a pale head like these Egyptian vultures, very similar. I don't have a picture here of it, but they are all black like most crows. And another very common one that's a bit bigger is the hooded crow. You can find those pretty much anywhere, from the shores and the beaches of Lake Balaton to these deep forests. You can see them just sitting on the top of the tree and crowing all day, calling all day. And then you can also find the eagles. There are white-tailed eagles. There are imperial eagles mostly. Those usually eat fish, and if they do find these carry-on meals that they can just fly over there, take a bit, because they of course are huge and they scare all the other crows away. They can just eat it all up and then fly away. They're very, I wouldn't say migratory, but they do a lot of moving around. Especially the white-tailed eagles, when they fledge, they will usually fly thousands of miles away from their home, and then they will of course build a new nest after they have reached maturity, usually after they turn 2. So these birds also live a pretty long time. Another gap that I found compared to the birds that you can find in Iowa would be in the pelicans. They can't find pelicans here. I was really hoping to find these birds when we came, but then I was looking at the field guide, the range map, and I looked on eBird, the different range maps, and I couldn't seem to put it together that I could find these birds here. And I was like, then what eats the fish? But then, because I knew that there were a lot of fish nurseries and things here that they do a lot of these fishing lakes and things, especially created for fishing purposes. The great cormorant actually takes care of all the fishing needs of the entire country. The EU, or European Union, has declared these birds protected by law. So you really can't do anything about them. But some big fishermen or companies have gotten permission to shoot these birds because they have done such big damage in the fish populations. In Hungary and Germany especially, and France, which is just 3 of the many countries that are part of the EU, and the other parts of Europe, they really aren't as common. These birds nest in colonies like the double-crested doe and most other cormorants. They nest in trees, of course, and they build these huge nests, but The biggest problem is where they nest. There's, of course, a lot of poop. So this is very acidic and it will actually kill the tree and, of course, all vegetation around there. And it becomes super hot and a bunch of the chicks actually die from overheating. So this is it's going to become a serious problem if they can't control these birds pretty soon. This bird I actually took this picture at that local park that I was talking about earlier as well. And there are even 15 birds there. Like every day, there are 5 to 15 just sitting on posts or just drying themselves or swimming around. And they also eat about, I know in kilograms, only about 3 to 4 kilograms of fish daily. So that would be a huge loss to all the fish stocks, wild fish stocks, and fish nurseries as well. Another animal that eats a lot of fish but isn't as common is the Eurasian otter. This isn't very common mammal species, and it isn't a bird, obviously, because I just brought it in here because it was very interesting. But we're always being super quiet when we're going birding because we don't want to miss out on anything. We're listening to fine birds, and we're always super quiet, so we see these rare mammals all the time. But we've never seen this one before until this time when I was trying to actually record one of those Eurasian reed warblers because I couldn't find it. So I decided that I was going to just take the recording so I could put that in eBird because that was the first time I saw one. We saw this Eurasian otter and it was just rolling around in the grass there. And it looked up at us and then it just continued doing it. It was really cute because it just rolled around there, looked at us, rolled around some more, and then it walked away, started playing around in the water. They're really cute animals and they are actually, I believe they are protected too because there aren't too many of them, mostly because of fish poisoning. With all the pesticides that are being sprayed around these lakes where they live, the fish, of course, get poisoned, and then a lot of them die because of these poisons. Another interesting mammal that we saw while I was trying to record birds that I thought was one species actually, but it turned out to be common cranes and little grebe. It was the first time I saw both species, and then we were sitting there and we were super quiet, but these wild boar, they're actually very common, and we just saw this animal on the other side of this very small, I guess you would say stream. It wasn't exactly a river, but it was just walking around on the other side. And we were like, what are we supposed to do? These are supposed to be so dangerous. Are you just supposed to climb a tree or just stand there or what? And we just froze. And then a pheasant actually flew up. And then it got scared of the pheasant, jumped into the stream, looked at us, and we were like, don't come this way, because we don't know what to do. And then these gray partridge, that I didn't mention near the game birds, it isn't as common as the pheasants, and I've never seen one. I just saw these fly away. It flew up right on our side of the lake, stream, and I didn't see them at first. And I was like, where did these come from? And both us and the boar got scared of that again, and it jumped 4 feet at a time right out of the stream and started running away super fast. We're like, what could this be? And then Mom and I, the two of us there, and looked at each other and we're like, oh, we did get eaten by this animal. But it was so cool to see this animal that nobody really sees around here because they just don't go to these places. And these animals, even though they're so dangerous, they really don't like people. They try and get away from them in a big circle. They will go around any kind of tourist. But this was a place where we got off the tourist route and we wanted to go look at these birds because we couldn't find them, the cranes and the little green. Then we just could not find them because they were, of course, on the other side of the stream, which we couldn't get across, and the other side of a bunch of reeds as well. We also had many experiences like this where we couldn't get across the stream. It is actually the same stream as well that comes from these larger, they call them mountains, but they're actually really these huge hills. There's this stream, and it's a man-made stream that comes all around, and it goes around the town, and it's right in the way to get to this private property, but they saw the black storks there. And this stream was in our way. We couldn't get across to go see these birds. So this is a very interesting stream that has given a lot of different experiences. I've taken up more than the expected time, so I'm going to close this presentation up right here with a very interesting bird that I was waiting to see for a while, since middle March when they arrived, are these European bee eaters. They aren't too common because they nest in sandbanks, which are pretty unusual anyway. And they also don't like people at all. This picture was actually taken from our local park where they did these renovations in 2018, where they built these big houses where there's this wooden wall. It's really tall and have these little windows about this big, 4 inches tall only, at different heights. So you can look through and you wouldn't disturb these birds, and you can watch them building their cavities in the sandbank. And it's a really cool bird that I was super excited to see. I hope everybody had a good time today. Does anybody have any questions that I didn't mention, anything that would want to learn more about?
That was fantastic, Zita. Thank you.